You make a mistake, you get walked into a room by your best friend, you don't walk out again.
When you have revenge in your heart, you might as well dig 2 graves, one for you, one for them.
Takes you on a tailspin of terrible life. We all have past, but you can do something to present and future.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the Millennial's Choice Show. I'm your host, Matthew Ablican, and I'm here with my brother from the same mother, Danny Ablican. Danny, welcome to the show.
What's going on, everyone?
What's going on? And we got another awesome episode, part of our mob stories, mob diaries, and we have a very special guest. He's somebody that I became familiar with more recently, and he's a friend of John Elite's, and we got acquainted that way with his manager. And I'm really excited to hear his story because, number one, he's doing some awesome things now. He's got a project from mobsters to monsters, or mobsters versus monsters. And I'm really excited to learn more about that project. And you guys could connect with him on that project as well on his Instagram at monsters versus mobsters. Should I reverse that, Frankie? Mobsters versus monsters, right? Yeah.
Yeah, mobsters versus monsters.
And we're going to have the link in the show notes for you guys. And I want to bring on to the show and welcome to the show, Frank Steel Pontillo. Frankie, thanks for coming on.
Good morning, gentlemen. Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Thanks for coming on. It's our pleasure. And I got to start right off the bat. Normally we ask people why don't you tell us a little bit about your upbringing and how that got started? And we definitely want to hear about that. But I need to know, how did you get the nickname Steel?
It's a funny story. I was involved in a shootout one time. And I don't know how old you guys are, but years ago, when you put gas in your car, they used to have oil stacked this into a pyramid with these cans, right? So I was getting out, pumping gas in my car, and I started getting shot at. So I was shooting back, and I ran out of bullets. And the oils was getting shot, and it was just pouring down my neck and my ear from out of the cans. And I was getting aggravated because there was oil in my ear, my neck. I threw the gun. I jumped in the car, crashed into somebody trying to get out of the gas station. And I said, this will never happen to me again. So I always would carry 2 pistols and about 6 clips, always. Or if I was carrying a little machine gun, 2 machine gun clips, and then a couple of backup 9mm clips. So one day we were going to do something, and I took my jacket off to put a bulletproof vest on. And the guy goes, why you got so many clips? I said, because, I ran out of bullets. And then they says, you like steel? And I was like, yeah. And then it kind of stuck.
Got that
and
steel.
And that's how I got that
awesome.
name.
Yeah. I was listening to one of your interviews, and you had 3 nicknames, and then eventually Steel was the one that stuck, right? So tell us about the other nicknames.
The first nickname was in the 70s. They used to call me Tuscan because there was a frozen yogurt ice cream, and it was called Tuscan Pops. And I always used to go to the corner store, buy a box, and eat the whole box thinking, okay, it's diet, it's yogurt. And I got that name as Tuscan when I was a kid. I was 6, 7 years old.
Wow.
That's hilarious.
I had that for a while. And then when I went to high school, my coach, Coach Sinagra, who I love, I respect, and I still friends with him till this day, because we go to our football alumni meetings every year. And he nicknamed me Beef, because I was like a side of beef, on the line. I played offensive tackle, and I played center. And he gave me that name. And then after the shootout, it was a wrap. I was Frankie Steel after that. Once we carry all these clips, because you don't want to be, not prepared. So
no, for sure. You always want to be prepared.
Then Steel stuck.
I like that.
And
That's badass,
it followed me into the underworld.
My nickname is just in our culture. If you know somebody who, for example, they're a barber, so they'll just say, the barber or whatever. And so with me, it's just real estate. Matthew, the real estate, not even the real estate agent, just the real estate. And so that's definitely not as interesting as Steel.
Yeah, that's usually how it works in the mob. You know, you have somebody who's got a big nose. He's Tony Big Nose. You got somebody who's got a messed up hand. He's Tommy, messed up hand or the hand. Or somebody who's ugly. He's the mask. Definitely Fat Jerry, Fat Paulie, Fat Tony. There's plenty of them. One arm, guy with one arm. He's Ronnie One Arm. So there's so many different things. There's a lot of Frankie Blue Eyes, a lot of them. So it's usually that's how it works too. In our old world, but it's pretty same thing would happen to you, just a little different. Yeah, because we have guys, Mikey Car Wash, Vinny TVs. It's all whatever they have like a background in, or it's part of their name. Like a little piece of their last name.
Yeah. Can you imagine being a boss and it's like Fat Andy or something? Like, how would the boss take, was that a nickname they wanted, or how would they take that? It sounds a little disrespectful.
No, listen, they take it out of love. It's all with love. It's not malicious. When I use somebody by their nickname, it's because we're close, we have a rapport, and it's all out of love. And it becomes second nature. You don't even call him by his real name no more. I was showing pictures of a bunch of guys, a list of names of their real name. I didn't know who they were until they showed me the picture, because I knew them by their nicknames. There's a book of mob nicknames, because I was contacted in prison maybe 25, 30 years ago, and they wanted to add my name in the book. So there's definitely a book somewhere of all the mob nicknames.
It's a good idea.
The guy and his nickname.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. So talk to us, Frankie. Tell us about your upbringing. What was it like growing up as a child? Where did you grow up? And tell us about your father and everything. Yeah.
It all started in Brooklyn. I was born in 1970, and my father just came home from prison not too long before that. And, he was always a knock-around guy. He was friendly with all the families, but he liked to sell heroin. So he would go out of the country, import it in from Istanbul, and that was his business, So he really never wanted to be straightened out or, have somebody over him watching. He just wanted to do his own thing. But he knew everybody, because even though drugs is, no drug rule in the mob, everybody was doing it. They couldn't stop. They couldn't leave that money on the table, so to speak. So they would do it behind the scenes. But he knew everybody. And growing up, everybody knew I was his son, so everybody knew me. And growing up in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn, there's a social club for every family, basically on every other corner. So you're around all these guys growing up. You see them, you become friendly with them. They know you, some know your history. And you see them, and you're mesmerized by it because you want the fancy car, you want the clothes, you want the money, you want the respect. So Brooklyn was a breeding ground to be in the life. And growing up around that, that's what I wanted to be. I wanted to be part of that. I wanted that. And then my father went to prison again after my mother died. And pretty much he was gone for about 5 years on that one. Because in total, he did about 52 years in prison. So, it was pretty, I was in the street very young and with a group of kids, and we would do our little hustles and sell things and steal things and bring it to the club, sell it to the guys, and they know who you are. And it's like little tests. They're watching you, grooming you. And then before you know it, you're part of them. You're with them. You're on record with them. And then it's almost like being a prospect for a biker gang, when you're on record with somebody who's a made member of one of the families. And that leads to you becoming a made member eventually, if you can pass all the tests down the road and prove yourself worthy, prove yourself really capable, of doing things that you're asked and everything. And when that day comes, basically it's called being proposed. And when you're proposed, your name goes around to all the 5 families, and it's circulated to see if anybody knows anything bad about you, to where they can knock your name down and you just stay associate. And if it goes through, then you become a made member, and pretty much you have a target on your back by law enforcement, and it's either going to be one of a few things: dead, in jail forever, or in and out of jail your whole life, or killed by one of your friends. Because there's a lot of treachery in this life that you don't see before. So growing up in Brooklyn, a lot of young guys see this and they end up on this path. You don't realize till later on in life, till something drastic happens, that you made a wrong choice. I regret every day not going to college to go play football. I regret it. I regret a lot of things, but life is full of regrets. You just have to learn from them and move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of going to ask you about your father, because he was part of the Gambino family, and then you became part of the Colombo family.
Yeah.
So why didn't you just join the Gambino family?
Well, here's the thing. When I was coming up, my father didn't want me part of anything because of all the time he's been in prison, all the treachery, backstabbing. There's a lot of behind the scenes things that are not glamorized, like in the movies and everything. There's a lot of treachery, and it's really not a good way of life. It's really horrible. And he didn't want that for me. And basically the Gambino guys, I was close with them. They had love for me, but he put the kibosh on it. So I had to make my own little path. And that's how I ended up, in the Colombo family.
Got it.
And I you know what? I did like it better this way. I didn't want to ride on anybody's coattails. I wanted to do my own thing and I wanted to let me speak for myself and be accepted for me, not because of who my dad was. Because there's a lot of that in the mob. A lot of guys who don't belong in positions because of who their dad was.
At what age did you first go into prison, and what was it for?
Actual prison, like sentenced, was for the Colombo War of 91, 92, which was a war that was an internal war in the family between the boss of the family, who was Carmine Jr. Persico, and the acting boss, who he put in charge while he was in prison, because he got a 139-year prison sentence. So he needed to have somebody acting for him so he can regain control from the prison. And the guy who was acting, it went to his head, which is a nice guy. Vic Arena, I don't want to talk bad about him. He was a nice guy. And he wanted it for himself because other families were in his ear that he was close with. Like John Gotti was a real good friend of his. And John Gotti was the boss of the Gambinos. And he was pushing for Vic to be the actual boss, not an acting boss. So he was in Vic Arena's ear. And, Vic went and pulled all his crew and his captains and told them what he was going to do. And it kind of got back to the Persico side. I'm going to break down how it happened.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah,
it's a little in depth, but I'm going to give it a holy grail of the Colombo War. Nobody did it this way right now.
Let's do it.
All right. So here's how it went down. Well, it started with me. Here's how it started. We were doing things in the street, and there was a kid that was killed by our social club on Bay 50th in Brooklyn, which was right next door from a bar called the Esplanade. There was these two guys that had an argument at Great Adventure Amusement Park during the day, and at night at the Esplanade, they were drinking and getting drunk. And one of the guys, his name was Frank Marassa. His nickname was Chestnut. He shot this guy Arthur in the doorway of our social club. And now Arthur's laying out, bleeding out. So I throw him in the car. I bring him to the hospital, put him on a gurney with some people by the emergency room, and I take off because I can't answer no questions. He ends up dying a few days later. because when he died and the cops were coming around, we went to California. But before we went to California, the guy Chestnut was killed. Okay? And who did that actual shooting. So while we were in California letting this die down, we get called back by Bobby Zam about the second or third week of June of 1991. Because on June 20th, now remember the dates, June 20th, 1991, Vic Arena was driving home. And while he was driving home to his home in Long Island that night, there was a hit team on him. And it was a couple of, captains, a consigliere, a few soldiers, and a couple of associates in different cars who were on Vic Arena to kill him because he wanted to become official boss against the Persicos. While he was at a light, one of the spotters ended up being at the light near him, and he turned his head and saw who it was and immediately took off because there was no way possible at 2:00 in the morning this guy was supposed to be right next to him in the car. So he knew it was a hit. Now he takes off. He doesn't get killed. There's no shots fired. But now he knows something's wrong. They want him dead. And now that starts the beginning. That's the seedling, besides his seedling of wanting to be actual official boss. Now that is basically first strike. So he knows now he's targeted. An internal war starts. He pulls some of his captains of who's going to be with him. And actually, Carmine Persico, he has his crew in Brooklyn, which is the Persico faction of the Colombo family, who's fighting for him. Then you had the Arena faction in the Colombo family, who's fighting for Vic Arena. So it's friends trying to kill each other now.
That's crazy.
Okay. Right. So now things are starting where there's meetings now with all the other families trying to mediate this. And they say, listen, let's have no shooting. Let's try to work this out between Carmine Persico and Vic Arena so that there's no drama in the streets with killings, because killings just bring heat and then law enforcement investigations, and there's no money being made. Well, I happen to be on the Persico side. And there was only about 30 of us versus about 80 of them. But our side, I don't want, we were taught by a person named Greg Scarpa Sr. I don't know if you ever heard of this man, but he ended up being a top echelon informant for the FBI for 30 years, since 1960. I can get into all that too. And not only was he a top echelon informant for the FBI, he was also involved in the mob. He was one of the main killers for the Colombo family. He was one of the main top earners for the Colombo family. And all along, he was living a double life that no one knew about. Okay? So he had a green light to kill. So when you're around a guy like this growing up, watching him kill people and watching how he operates, we're learning from a lunatic who has a green light. We don't have the green light. So he's breeding a bunch of lunatics. So our faction was more dominant of killers and assassins on our side than theirs. So we didn't care, we were outnumbered. Our guys, no matter what we were told to do, kick your door in at 3 a.m. and do what you got to do to somebody, they'll do it. Whereas their guys, they only had a few of them guys, about 3 or 4. The rest were, put in positions where they really shouldn't have been. Because they earn money, because they have, they have qualities to be in the mob, but they don't have that street, ethics of to be all around gangster, earner, a shooter, stand up. They just have the earner. And a lot of guys are put in positions because they earn big money. So that was more on their side. I'm not trying to talk bad about guys, but the facts are the facts.
So there was
Okay?
there was credentials then, like that people would get, I guess, right?
The what?
So people would have credentials, like this guy would be known as like an earner. He would get that title, right?
Yes.
And then, like you said, shooter, I guess, if they, were good with the pistol or with the gun, right?
Basically, in the mob, it's called doing a lot of work. When you do a lot of work, that means you're capable of murder, and you've done it before. Okay? Okay, so it's called doing work. So our side of, about 30 guys was the more dominant faction, as far as people who could do work. And this thing starts breaking out. But now Greg Scarpa, he wants to start a shooting war. Unbeknownst to us, the FBI is telling him to do that. So we don't know. So we think he's just a lunatic that wants to go out with a bang because he's dying of cancer. Meanwhile, it wasn't cancer, it was AIDS. And I can get into that too. It's intricate, but I'm giving you the holy grail right now.
Yeah, sounds good. Please keep going.
Yeah, so now Greg is a lunatic. To give you a little background about him, he's been around the family, 30, 40 years. He's done a lot of work for the family. I mean, he stopped counting at 50 bodies, and plus he was doing work for the government in other countries, Yeah, and there's a whole thing with him going down to Mississippi. If you ever saw the movie Mississippi Burning, where the 3 activists got killed by the Ku Klux Klan, and all of a sudden the National Guard found them. Well, it didn't happen like that. They sent Greg Scarpa down there to kidnap the head dragon of the Ku Klux Klan and torture him in some hut in the swamp in Mississippi to tell him where the bodies were buried.
Oh, wow.
That's
so
what really happened.
He was working for not only as an informant, but he was putting in work for the government.
Yeah, he was putting in work for the government and for the family, and he would do things that other guys wouldn't want to do. Like, again, it's supposed to be no killing women or children. This man was vicious. He'd kill whoever he had to. So fast forward now to the mob, now to the war. Now Greg wants to have a shooting war. Now there's an attempt on his life. On November 18th, 1991, he's coming out of his house. His grandson and his daughter were getting into a car. There was cars, backup shooters to protect him in different cars. And when they got to the corner, a box truck cut him off, and guys got out and started shooting. Now that's all that had to happen. They tried to kill Greg with his daughter and grandkid in the car. So now this guy, all he does is see red and wants to go on a killing spree now. He don't care that the other family said no shooting, no this. He wants blood. So now the shooting war starts. Now, we were in California before this happened, right before this shooting on Greg. We were in California after the Chestnut murder, hiding out there, having some fun. And we got called in after this whole thing with Vic, the attempted hit on Vic Arena. So now we fly back, and our captain at the time was Bobby Zambardi, who died recently last year. And he was like, listen, this is what's going down. There's a war going to happen. You're either going to get killed, you're going to have to kill, you're going to end up in jail. Those are the 3 options. You can go home and not be part of it, or you can be part of it. Naturally, we're going to stay with our friends, and we're going to do what we have to do and rise through the ranks, putting our work in now in the war. So basically, it's like going to a company, say going to work for Google as some type of coder, and all of a sudden now some major thing you invent, and you have a new app that everybody's using, and they all want you, and you move up through the ranks. Well, that's what a war is to the mob. Something like that, trying to give a correlation. You follow?
Yep.
So now the war's happening. Now you're going to prove yourself. Everybody wants to put their balls on the line, which again, you look back at this, and I don't even know how I was involved in this insanity, but it happened. And thank God I'm still here. Don't even know how. But now we come back. Now we get involved in the war. And basically there was safe houses in Jersey, in Brooklyn, and Staten Island. And each hit team had a safe house where all we did was stay there or hide until the spotters told us where somebody is. And then we go into a stolen car that's in the garage in the house, or two garages, with two cars, or a van or something that's stolen. Go out, arm yourself, have all your weapons, bulletproof vests, masks, and go out and hunt. And this started, a shooting war in the streets of Brooklyn, in Staten Island, in Long Island, where there were so many shootouts and so many murders, and it just brought so much law enforcement to smother the 5 boroughs. Okay, so now on November 1991, this guy, Benny Aloy, he was a top guy on the arena side. He ends up escaping, shots are fired, he don't die, he gets away. Now that's the arena faction that the personal faction tried to get. Now, since we tried to get him, the arena faction now goes and hunts one of our guys down in Sheepshead Bay. His name was Hank Smura. They call him Hank the Bank. He was a big, big guy. All he would do was eat and fall asleep right in front of you. You go to dinner, he'd eat his pasta, he'd eat a couple of things of mozzarella, and all of a sudden he'd be like this. Sleeping.
That's hilarious.
Until it was time to have coffee. Then have the coffee, go right back. So now, and unfortunately, that's how he died. And I'll tell you how. He was in Sheepshead Bay. Must have been eating something in his car, parked. He ate it, and all of a sudden, boom, he fell asleep. And that's how they found him in his car, shot in the head. So they snuck up on him. He didn't see it coming. So he was basically one of the lucky ones that just went to sleep and never woke up. And now he was on our side. So now they got one of our guys. So now they try to make a presence. Now, in November 28th, 1991, there was an attempt on 2 of our guys who happened to be getting a haircut. And they were in a place called Bruno's on 28th Avenue, right off of 86th Street in Bensonhurst, Brooklyn. Now, one of the guys getting a haircut was Larry Sessa. His nickname was Fat Larry because he was a big guy. And there was another guy of ours outside in the car with guns, waiting to make sure nobody goes into the haircut place for Larry, named Ronnie Cordler. When Fat Larry came out, there was arena faction guys across the street. As soon as he got in the car, they start shooting the car up. So Ronnie ducks. Fat Larry was shooting back. They're both ducked. He hits the gas with his hand and drives away, trying to look at the power lines to see where to go. And he ends up running over 4 people. And then realizes he's missing a finger. His finger got shot off.
Oh, wow.
But we found the finger. And where it was? It was wedged in the dashboard and the windshield. You know where the inspection sticker would go?
Yeah.
Wedged all the way in there. I had to get a pencil to pull it out.
Oh my gosh.
Put it on ice, send him to the hospital. Okay. So now the arena faction did a hit, killed one of our guys, Hank, tried to kill Larry and Ronnie. Now we're all fired up. Now it's Greg just wants blood. He wants bodies. He don't care who on that side. If they owned a dog and it was one of theirs, he'd kill the dog too. That's how he was. So now,
Frankie, sorry, I want to pause real quick. It sounds like a war is literally happening Like it's
It
an
is.
actual war zone.
Yeah.
What was
Oh, yeah.
going
I'm
on in
bringing
your
you-
head at this time?
No
Were
one
you
ever
just-
did this. So what I'm telling you now, no one ever did this on a podcast or anywhere.
No, this is a Millennial's Choice exclusive, right
One hundred
here.
percent.
Yes,
Like
this is
The
definitely an
Colombo
exclusive.
Wars. We're learning details about the Colombo War, and we haven't heard
Yeah.
this. So
Yeah.
Like, what was
So-
going on in your head at that time? What were you thinking?
Well, I was thinking that we have to kill everybody. I was on a crazy mode,
For
you
real?
know, and
it's kill or be killed at this point.
it was, and you with a lunatic who just loves killing, and you're all fired up. You think you're doing you're doing what you're supposed to be doing. That's how you're brainwashed at this point. Basically, it's like you don't care about nothing else except this war, getting through it, and just getting your enemy before they get you, because it's different. This is a war where it's friends killing friends. So I know all their bad habits. They all know our bad habits. They know our routine. So it's different. It's not like getting in the car, going to kill somebody and coming back out and driving away. This is where they know everybody. You're known. They know every move you make. So it was a little, crazy at times. And again, you're in this situation and you don't realize till later on, what was I thinking? So now after Ronnie gets shot, his finger gets shot off and Larry gets shot at, there's another old timer named Black Sam on December 5th, 1991. This old timer named Black Sam Nastasi. And he was like 80 something years old, or close to knocking on 90's door. He was like really old. He was playing cards in the club. He was really just like, shouldn't have been killed, but he was on our side, but he wasn't active. Carmine was the boss. He's the boss. That's how it's going to be. And he would stay in his club and play cards. He didn't think he was going to be a target. The Arena faction went in there, shooting. They end up shooting the bartender lady, in her breast, and they killed Black Sam. Now they kill another one of our guys, Black Sam, even though he wasn't, active. So now this is December 5th, 91. Now Greg wants, blood. So now in between these actual murders, there's attempted murders taking place all in between of this, of shootouts that nobody even reported, going back and forth with everybody. So now there's a crew hunting around one day, and it's December 8th, 1991. There's an arena guy named Vinny Busaro. His nickname was Vinny Venus because he was had something to do with the Venus Diner. So Vinny Venus was hanging his Christmas lights outside his house. And on the ladder, while he was on the ladder, Greg stopped the car, and Greg loved to use a thing called a rifle called an M1. And there's some history with the M1. He just never threw it away. He just would make another notch in it and continue using it. Meanwhile, he's supposed to throw the gun away, He never did. He never did. And that was a sign when I noticed it a few weeks later on something I did with him, because I thought he threw it out. So Vinny Vasaro, he's hanging his Christmas lights, and Greg shoots him from the car, right off the ladder. So now an Arena faction guy is taken down. And a few days later, there's another Arena faction who's the son of Luis Bobo Malpizo, a guy that I tried to kill. I'll get into that afterwards. And his son was coming out of his house, and Persico guys, our team, shot at him. He got hit in the chest. He didn't die. So 2 Arena faction guys got hit. And the next day, the Arena faction now sends 2 idiots from their crew to kill somebody in our crew who has a bagel store in Bay Ridge, Brooklyn. Now, the victim, who was an innocent victim who worked at the store, was killed by these 2 idiots. It was a father and son. And yeah, and basically it was the son was called Chris Liberatore, and the father was something Liberatore. I never met them because they were two idiots, but they were going around, shooting people, thinking it was okay, and they went and killed an innocent worker at one of our guys' establishments, was a bagel store, looking for a guy, Frank Guerrero. His name is BF, and BF owned the store. So when they went in there, the kid told him he's not here, and the kid Chris ended up shooting this kid for no reason. That was the beginning of the end, because the government would have let us kill it out in the street because we're just killing each other.
Exactly.
Now, when an innocent bystander gets hit and killed, and the kid was only 18 years old.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Yeah, his
Being
name
so
was
cheap?
Mateo Speranza. And it was a shame that this kid got killed. Now you see that they're reckless now. They're not keeping it in-house, basically. So now we go and we start, hunting again, and in and out of the safe house. And again, in the safe house, you're doing crazy things in the street during the war. Then you come back to the safe house, we're cooking and laughing, telling stories, loading up clips. Most of the night was spent just loading up clips, duct taping them, 3 clips, switching them. So when you put them on the AR-15, you got to, just keep switching it. And, loading the semi-automatic shotguns with buckshot, slugs, buckshot, BBs, you're mixing it up, It's like a potpourri of ammunition in that, because you never know what's going to happen, So you're doing that, you're reading, and you have the camaraderie, and you really lose track of the insanity that's taking place right now. And again, I look back at it and I'm like, how the hell was I involved in this? So now, after that murder of Mateo Speranza, which was the innocent victim, the government sent agents from every state, because all you seen following us and following was out-of-state plates, from all the cars following us. And it swarmed the neighborhood. And there's a detective, Tommy Dades. He was part of the organized crime task force and everything. And he'll I don't know if you ever heard any of his interviews. He said that was the beginning of the end for the Colombo family.
Yeah. The government just wanted it to stop. That's it. The government just wanted it to stop. That was it.
Yeah, because now it's getting messy.
Yeah.
And again, they tried to hit Greg Scarpa again. And it failed. Another shootout. That was on December 30th. That second hit on Greg. Now Greg, again, he wants blood. January 7th, 1992, Avenue U, right before McDonald Avenue, there was a little park called the Triangle. And there's 3 carloads of guys. And it's the middle of the afternoon, 3:00 in the afternoon. There's thousands of people everywhere. Okay, I'm talking a lot of people, not thousands, but hundreds everywhere in the mid-afternoon. And you can see there's law enforcement everywhere following. Greg gets out of the car and makes a phone call at a payphone where we thought he had a source, some type of law enforcement source. We didn't know, again, he was a top echelon informant working both sides, the government and the mob. So Greg makes a phone call and says, I'm going to have the place cleared out soon. I'm going to go, cleared out what? Cleared out of law enforcement. So now all of a sudden we come back an hour later and there's no cars around. There's no law enforcement anywhere because they were so thick on us, they're on you. There was nobody on us. Nobody. And there was a gentleman who was a powerful guy on the arena side, okay? His name was Nicky Grancio. His nickname was Nicky Black. He was a big money guy on the arena faction, and he was double parked by that Triangle Park. And that's when the Persico side, Greg Scarpa and a few other people, Larry Mazur and a couple other people, took a shotgun and shot Nicky Black in the face.
Wow, right in the face.
Blew his nose right off his face.
Oh.
Right off. That went on the dashboard too. And he had his nephew there, and he ended up getting shot in the leg. His name was Anthony Bianco. Okay. And that was a big message from the Persico faction to the Arena faction, because it was done in broad daylight in front of hundreds of people, and everybody seen what happened. Everybody, if this was a cell phone era and people had cell phones, it would have been a viral video.
Viral for sure.
100%.
Viral.
That would have been viral for
right
sure.
In broad daylight, not even something where you're running out of the car, just stopping the car right next to his, walking out, doing what they did. And Greg, sitting in the car, just sniffing the gun barrel of the gunpowder, this maniac, driving away with the 3 carloads, driving away with everybody screaming. Okay. And in mob hits through the years, it's been a long time since there was a brutal one like that, with a shotgun to the back of the head where the whole face comes off. So that set the tone of the Arena faction now, a little panicking now, because now they see that the Persico faction, don't care that there's hundreds of people around in broad daylight with everybody watching. And they got a little nervous. But now, remember what I told you, the law enforcement disappeared? We find out later on, years later, while we're incarcerated, Greg called his handler, Agent Lindley Del Vecchio, and said, I need you to get these guys out of here. He ends up calling a fake meeting and gets all the squads back to the main office for a fake meeting to get them off the street so this hit could take place. He ends up getting indicted later on for murders that he basically helped, because we were getting lists of where people were hiding that we didn't know where Greg was getting this list from, but they were always on point. It was the list from the agents surveilling these guys. So now I'm just pressing pause on the war. So now when Agent Lindley Del Vecchio gets indicted, he says, I want a trial by judge, not a jury. And basically he was found not guilty. So it came from Washington, because he wasn't the main handler of Greg. He was handling him for the street, but Greg was in the government and they didn't want it to come out. So everything that he did was basically whitewashed. He was doing murders, we find out later on, and blaming other people in the Persico faction. So he would kill somebody with some crew guys. We don't know. He's making a call saying, yeah, Chucky did it. Jojo did it. Meanwhile, they didn't do it.
So he was snitching on his own crew.
Yes.
For stuff he did.
What?
For stuff that he did.
Oh, yeah. For his murders. Yeah. So we don't know this is even happening till later on in life, when we start, when he dies and it all comes out. So now, after the Nicky Black hit, the arenas are running scared. So now, there's a lot of hits in between. When Nicky Black got hit in January 7th, 1992, we seen another Arena faction guy. Okay, his name was Joe Cacace. So February 1992, Joe Cacace, he was shot in the stomach. He ended up living. He was coming out of a dry cleaner with his dry cleaning on his finger, and Greg saw him. There was a couple of carloads of guys, like always, backup shooters, crash cars, because when you're hunting, you need to have certain cars in place in case a cop car does try to chase you. You have a backup car with 2 guys with no guns or 1 guy with no gun. He's going to crash in the car on accident and take off to try to stop the law enforcement. So you have your crash cars, you have your backup shooters, you have your actual shooters. This is all that's what's going on right now. So Joe Waverly was walking out of the dry cleaner. He gets shot in the stomach. We don't know he doesn't die until afterwards. We thought for sure he was dead, the way he got hit. And again, he was an Arena faction member. He was a powerhouse on their side. So now that Nikki Black just got taken down a month before, now Joe Waverly, now they know that their big target guys are getting hit. So now we find out from the Arena faction, there's a bounty now on Greg Scarpa's head. Whoever kills him, besides getting the credit for killing him, they get another $20,000. They're going to get a bonus. So now Greg's even more mad because he thinks now that he's only worth $20,000. It sets him off. He
I was
wants
just
to kill
gonna say that
everybody
sounds
now.
pretty low, like from what you hear in like the movies and whatnot. I thought maybe it was gonna be like $1 million hit on his head.
This is in the 80s. This is in the the 90s.
90s, yeah.
So the 90s, like 20,000 is probably what, at least $100,000 now.
No, 20,000 was nothing. It was just
Still nothing.
listen. When you're doing work for the family, you do it for free. You don't charge. This was just a little bonus to give somebody an incentive to go after the maniac who's protected by a bunch of maniacs.
Yeah.
So it's
But
like
he
almost
looked
like
at it as
a suicide mission.
But he looked at it like, you guys are saying I'm only worth $20,000.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now Greg is pissed off. He's only worth 20,000, and he gets aggravated. So now he wants to go on a shooting spree. So now there's these a month later now, March 25th of 1992. But there was a lot of shootings in between. I just don't want to bore you with the different shootings. There's two Arena guys eating in a restaurant on Long Island. One's named John Minerva, and the other one is Michael Imbergamo. They were eating in one of Vic Arena's restaurants that were around him. They both get killed at the same time. So two of those Arena guys get killed by the Persico side. Because Greg sees red right now. He's so crazy. He wants to get anybody and everybody. But they're hiding now. They're really hiding. So he'll take anybody right now that's any relation to the Arena faction. So now, in March 27th, 1992, there's a guy on the Arena side named Joe Monteleone. He's still alive. He's in prison. And Tommy Schatz Gioli. They were in Court Street area. They were more like the downtown crew of Brooklyn. They both get shot at from the Arena faction. Okay? And I think Tommy Schatz, he got shot in the hand, I believe. Yeah, he got shot in the stomach or the hand. I don't remember where he got shot exactly, but he got shot, and that was March 27th, 1992. Now, April, here's the guy. Remember I told you, Louis Bobo Malpizzo, and his son got shot in the chest? Well, now this guy, he was on the Arena faction, and I knew him well. I knew where his girlfriend lived, and we were staking out the girlfriend's house. And I had binoculars that can see probably like, I don't know, a quarter mile, like I'm right up on you. And I seen him coming out of the house, getting into his blue Lincoln. He had a powder blue Lincoln. And he gets in it. So now I get into the stolen car. I'm in the passenger seat. There's Mike DiMatteo is driving. My friend Richie's in the back. There's crash cars all around. And now we're just waiting on the side for this powder blue Lincoln to come by. Now, he was a good block and a half away when he was going in his car. At some point before we got to the next block where we were, a same powder blue Lincoln was in front of him. So now that car comes to the stop sign. I'm getting out of the car, and there's two powder blue Lincolns. I get right back in the car.
What are the odds?
What are the odds of that?
That's so annoying.
Okay, so
I guess
get
you're
back
trying
in
to
the
kill
car.
somebody.
The idiot is listening to his music and don't even realize that he just passed us.
Oh my gosh.
So now I chase him down. So now in the front, the other powder blue Lincoln leaves. He goes to the next block, and one of the crash cars are on that block. he gets in front. This guy, Joe Ambrosino, was in that car. His name was Joe Brains because he was an idiot. So Joe Brains is in the car, and we're behind the Powderable Lincoln now. And I'm telling Joe Brains on the walkie-talkie, stop the car. He stops it, but he leaves enough room to squeeze a car to. If you want to really squeeze something, hit the gas and hit the cars, he does. So when he stops the car, I get out and I start shooting. I send 3 or 4 rounds into the car. I thought for sure I got him because he crashed right into the car. So now as I was running over to the car to see him in there, I see his head get up, and now he takes off in between Joe Brains' car, smashing into all the cars to get away. And now I run a little bit to the corner, and I got him in my sights, but also there's a playground of kids in a schoolyard right there. So I stopped, went back to the car, and we go. Now I think for sure this guy is hit, and he's going to end up crashing and dying somewhere. Well, he didn't. He lives, and I'll tell you how. Later on in life, when I go to trial, this idiot doesn't burn his car after a shooting. He sent it to a body shop to fix it. So the FBI went and confiscated the car. Now they bring the car in, they send it to Quantico, Virginia, and take it apart. Now during my trial, they bring in the forensic report of the car. That particular Lincoln, in the headrest, had a big metal plate. And that's where all the 9mm rounds were in the metal plate. That saved him.
Wow.
But the idiot, they also found bullet holes from a .38 in the trunk, facing down into his trunk. So this idiot shot somebody in his trunk and kept the car.
Oh my gosh. That's unbelievable.
Okay. Yeah, so now that happens, and I end up seeing him in prison later on. During my trial, I'm got my suit on, I'm getting ready to go into the van to get taken to court. He ends up getting arrested. Now, Bobo looked like Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future. That's what he looked like. And he ends up coming into the bullpen. I'm sitting there with my suit on, getting ready to go to court. And he's like, Steel, I'm not mad at you. It was all business. I said, yeah, it was. Because he knew it was me. He seen me run into his car. But backtrack now. And now back to the war. Now there's another Arena faction member they want to get. And Greg ended up getting the address where this guy was hiding from the FBI. And his name was Larry Lampisi. He was big in the school bus industry. And he was getting up early to go to the office because he actually worked. Even though he was a made man in the family, he actually had a business to run for the city schools. He had school contracts. So he would go there and, do whatever he did in his office. Well, he didn't make it to the office that day. He didn't make it to his car. There was a hit team on him, and I'll just tell you what took place. Greg shoots him. And while he was on the floor, he's like dying. Greg tells him, he asks Greg, why? Why'd you shoot me? Why'd you do this to me? Because they were friends. And Greg told him, because you were on the wrong side, and then finished him.
Wow.
That's insane.
That's how Larry
Stone Cold.
Lampisi gets killed. And now another Arena faction member bites the dust. Okay? So now, that was May 22nd, 1992. June 4th, one of our friends on our side, one of the younger guys, like my era of guys, tough kid, put a lot of work in, and his name is Tommy. I'm not going to give you the last name, because you don't need it, but his name is Tommy. Remember the lunatic kid that killed the innocent bystander in the bagel store? Well, Tommy was pulled over by a park. The kid pulled up right alongside him, that guy, Chris Liberatore, the reckless killer of the Mateo Speranza. He tries to kill Tommy. Tommy, he shoots, but Tommy sees, Tommy's alert. He sees what's happening. and dives out the window because the other passenger window is open. He dove right out. And this kid, Chris, shoots wildly at Tommy. And once again, there's a kid playing basketball. A stray bullet hits him. But this kid, his name was Daniel Norden. He was 16 years old. And he's seriously wounded, but he recovers. But I think he's like in a wheelchair maybe till this day. All right. So this kid, Chris Liberatore, killed an innocent bagel store and now an innocent kid playing basketball. You know, so the arena faction was sending out these idiots while they were hiding, you know, because they knew we were coming and we weren't stopping. Now, that's in June 1994. Now, June 10th, oh, not 1994. That was June 4th, right? 1992.
Yeah.
June 10th, 1992. We're at Joe Brains' house. So we decide that day we're gonna hold on, I'm losing you. Hold on. We decide that day we're gonna go to Brooklyn, get some sausage from Faico Sausage. They got the best sausage, and grill it in the backyard and take a leisure day and just sit by the pool. You know, no killing that day. And let me just fix this for you. And no killing that day. We're just gonna relax. No craziness. So we get everything. We go back to Joe Brains' house. When we get back to Joe Brains' house, I see agents. So I'm like, all right, there's a problem here. I go in the backyard and I tell them there's agents everywhere. So now we get in his car, which we didn't know. His car was borrowed by this guy, Carmine Imbriali, about a week before to go to a funeral. It never went to a funeral. He took it to the agents and they wired the car. So all along we're in this car and it's bugged. So now we get in the car, which was wired for sound, and we start driving through the neighborhood by Joe Brains' house. And I'm pointing the agents out. And he goes, listen, there's a bag of guns in my trunk. We got to get them out. So we pull over. I take the bag of guns and I hang it on like a little tree. Like it was like a duffel bag with just like pistols and little Mac 11s and Mac 10s, a lot of clips, you know, stuff like that. No long rifles or anything. And I hang it by this tree, and we go and we lose the agents and we go back to his house because we got to start cooking sausage. Agents everywhere. We're cooking sausage. That was important. So now, while we're cooking the sausage, I got to go get Italian bread. I take the motorcycle to get Italian bread, and there's agents everywhere, you know? And I end up going to get the bag of guns because I'm thinking, you know, somebody's going to find them. So I end up going with the motorcycle. I get the bag. I get it on my shoulder. And I go back to the house. Once I pull up to the house, his wife was walking out right by the curb. And I said, here, hide these. As I said, hide these, every car on the block, basically doors opened, vans opened. A guy walking a dog, which really wasn't his personal dog, was a police dog. So I was running at me, agents everywhere. And I just hit the gas and took off with the motorcycle. They tried to cut me off at the corner. I went around them. And now I start a high-speed chase from Staten Island into Jersey.
That's badass, man.
With like 30 agent cars chasing me down on my race. I have a race bike. You know, I have a GSXR 1100 all worked up. You know? So this chase happens. They're trying to run me over. They end up crashing. Helicopters are following me. I make it through Staten Island. I go to New Jersey. And while this is happening, you know, you're thinking, how am I going to get away? You know, what do I do? I keep checking to make sure that the gas is not running out. And there's cars behind me, but they're falling out because I'm on a highway now and I'm gone. But the only thing keeping up with me now is this helicopter that keeps swerving around and going ahead of me, turning. It's like, it was crazy.
I feel like this could have been avoided if you had Uber Eats and you could have just ordered some food instead of having to go get bread. Is that right?
What?
I feel like this could have been avoided if you had Uber Eats at the time. You could have just ordered some food.
If it was now, I could have Uber Eated the bread, or DoorDash did or something.
Something,
man.
Yeah.
Skip the dishes.
But it was a good
skip
thing.
the feds.
It was a good thing, because if I didn't do that, they would have had me in the backyard in the pool eating a sausage sandwich, getting arrested that day.
Yeah,
That's
because
true.
they ended up arresting everybody in the backyard.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, yeah, it worked out.
They arrested everybody in the backyard, and now I go through a roadblock by the outer bridge in Staten Island. They had a whole big roadblock for me. I go through the roadblock. I get to the other side, helicopter, New Jersey police, agents, all on that side. I go around them, and now I'm thinking to myself, how do I get away? How do I get away? I know there's a Woodbridge Mall. On Route 1, there's a mall. And I'm knowing if I can get to this mall, I can get away. So I get to the mall. I jump off the bike right at the front door, one in the mall. And then there was a sporting goods store with racks of clothes, like outside and inside. And I just picked something off the rack and I just put it on me. Like I was Jason Bourne, walking, just put it on me. And I walked to the actual other entrance, and there was a row of taxis. I just got in one, and I says, drive. I'll tell you where. And as I'm pulling out of this place, you hear all the sirens and the helicopter, everything circling. And I'm like, oh my God, how did I do this? First, how did I not kill myself? Because I was doing 180 miles an hour at certain points. And but your adrenaline is so pumped up that you don't even care. I would have went 500 miles an hour just to get away, because you're on survival mode now. And I pull away, and I'm like, I couldn't even believe it. And I beat one of my friends, and I tell him, when I get to a payphone at one of the rest areas on Garden State Parkway, and I tell him what happened, and I said, listen, everybody's pinched. And I said, I'm going to hide. And that's when I became a fugitive that day. But I ended up getting locked up later on, not too far later. I was at some place I shouldn't have been. And they ended up getting me there. And then I was sent to the MCC, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, and everybody was there, basically. All my friends. So basically this ends with me getting locked up and starting the fight in federal prison now of the case of the Colombo War case. And remember, at this point, Greg Scarpa is still alive, and while he's out there, we're in MCC, we're indicted, he's out there on house arrest. He ends up getting into a shootout over something with his friend, with his son's friend, and gets his eye shot out. So now we hear this on 1010 Wins, the AM radio. And when that happens, it kind of comes out that he was working for the government, And at this point, we were already convicted. We were awaiting sentencing. So that's where we could stop this now, where the prison part of the story begins.
Awesome.
Good?
So, so you know what? For our viewers, our listeners, this was part one of two parts. That was awesome. As you said, Frankie, that the Colombo Wars, nobody's talked about it with this much detail, even to the exact dates. Nobody's talked about it. So this was an exclusive.
Nobody. This is the first time right here.
First time. So check out part 2, you guys. We're going to pick up right where we left off. And it's on our channel. Give us a thumbs up, subscribe, leave us a comment.